Welcome into another episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. I am Will Thomas, and today we are continuing our roster breakdown series with the Auburn Tigers. So Auburn, they got rid of Hugh Freeze in the middle of last year, and they ended up with Alex Golesh from USF as their new head coach. And as we go through this whole roster makeup, you're going to see a lot of USF. He brought a ton of Bulls over with him to play on the Plains in the SEC, which can be both a good and maybe a bad thing, right? Because obviously, USF was a really good team last year. They went and beat Florida on the road, so they beat an SEC team. But does it translate to week in and week out playing at an SEC program? And we'll see, because I do believe that Golesh is a good coach. I believe that most of these players are good players, and they have that continuity with each other. So we'll see how it plays out, but let's just get straight into the two deep for the Auburn Tigers this year. Starting off at quarterback, obviously we have Byron Brown coming over from USF. He was the Bulls quarterback at 6'3", 233 as a senior. His legs are his biggest weapon. So, the last headline you saw of Byron Brown was probably that he didn't have great numbers during the spring game. But that makes sense because his legs weren't being used. They weren't running him with contact. They weren't having him go out there and put his shoulder down. He wasn't using his best weapon. So, of course, he didn't play very well, right? So, the spring game doesn't concern me at all. His arm does still need to develop. Obviously, he isn't the strongest passer, but there is time for him to figure that out over the summer and in the fall before games start. But right behind him at quarterback is a guy who did have a good spring game, and that's Tristan Tia, a 6'2", 205-pound redshirt freshman Oregon State transfer. He played in just 3 games last year for the Ducks. Did start one, but he was 37 of 53 passing for 385 yards and 3 scores. Now, Tia had the better A-day. He's not going to be their quarterback. Byron Brown is going to be Auburn's quarterback barring an injury, but Tia had a good showing, and as a redshirt freshman, a younger guy, that is very promising to see that, and he'll have this year to sit behind Byron Brown. Moving on now to the running backs, that room is led by returner Jeremiah Cobb. He's a 5'11", 200-pound senior who was third-team All-SEC last season. He carried the ball 175 times for 970 yards and 5 scores, and had 500-plus yard games. So having that continuity in the running back room with a veteran leader, a proven producer, that's pretty big, especially when you're bringing a guy like Bryson Washington to be one of his backups. He is a Baylor transfer at 6 foot, 216 pounds as a junior. He had 788 yards on the ground last year with 6 scores, broke 1,000 yards as a freshman. Bryson Washington is a really good runner. He's a little bit bigger than Cobb, so he can be more of that bruiser, at extra inch, 16 more pounds. So Washington will be a more physical force. And another guy who's the exact same size as Bryson Washington is a USF transfer here in Nakai Davenport. He's 6 foot, 216. He's a true sophomore. He had 98 carries for over 600 yards and 7 scores for the Bulls last season. So there's continuity in the running back room with Auburn and Jeremiah Cobb. They're bringing over Nakai Davenport, who's used to Byron Brown, some of the blockers, the coaching staff, and they have Bryson Washington coming in from Baylor. So you're reaching to a bunch of different pots to get your running backs, but it is a very good top 3 in that running back room, and some other guys who spell those backs. Omar Mapson II is a 5'9", 213-pound sophomore. He ran for 71 yards and just 16 carries in the scoring limited action last year. And also Tay Meadows, who is a transfer from Troy. He's 5'10", 200 pounds as a senior. He had 741 yards and 7 scores during his time with the Trojans. But moving on outside now to the wide receiver room. A lot of USF here. Starting off with Jeremiah Coger, who is a 6'3", 209-pound sophomore. He had 38 catches for almost 600 yards and 8 scores last year. Chaz Nimrod, who is 6'2", 198 as a junior. He had 23 grabs for over 400 yards last year and 3 scores. Had 7 games before being injured, and he also spent time at Tennessee. And Keyshawn Singleton is a 6'3", 215-pound junior who played in 12 games last year, started 7 for the Bulls, had 50 catches, 877 yards, and 8 scores. So those top 3 guys, they're all from USF. And they all figure to be incredibly involved, obviously, in Auburn's offense this year. But the depth behind them is also very, very good. I want to highlight Deshaun Spencer, who is a true freshman receiver, 5'11", 165. As a senior in high school, he was formerly a running back, moved out to the slot. He had 76 grabs for over 1,300 yards and 20 scores last year, while still running for over 400 yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground. This guy, as a true freshman, he's the best, prototypical looking slot guy that Auburn has in that room. He's going to get a lot of playing time really early. I brought him up on all my other channels before. Deshaun Spencer is a guy that I'm really excited for, but also Brian Williams Jr., who is a 6'4", 190-pound freshman out wide. He had 34 catches for over 500 yards and 7 scores during his senior season in Orlando. And Duke Smith, who is a 6 205-pound redshirt freshman. He played in 4 games last year at receiver, but mainly special teams for Auburn. To the tight end room, we got Jake Johnson, not that one, but he's a transfer from North Carolina. He's 6 240 pounds. He had 43 grabs, 400 yards, and 5 touchdowns during his career at UNC. They also bring in Jonathan Eccles, who is a USF transfer. He's 6'6", 235 as a sophomore. He played in 10 games, started 7 last year for the Bulls. with 9 grabs, 109 yards, and 3 scores. They also bring in Arliss Boardingham, who was 6'3", 250 pounds as a senior. He was at Bowling Green last year, but didn't play for Bowling Green. But before that, he spent a few years at Florida, where he was very productive. He had 44 catches for over 400 yards and 6 scores during his time in Gainesville. So I do believe that Boardingham, coming back up to the SEC, can be a really reliable piece for the Tigers. Going to the Big Uglies up front, the offensive line at tackle, they have Joe Simmons, who is 6'5", 322 pounds. He is a transfer from James Madison. He started all 13 games last year with the Dukes. And across from him is Ty Buster, who is 6'3", 313 pounds as a redshirt freshman. He only played in 2 games last year, but he was a 4-star guy in the 2025 class. So tons of talent there for Auburn at offensive tackle. Moving inside to guard, Derek Plaz is 6'4", 310-pound sophomore who transferred in from Miami. He played in 4 games last year for Miami, so it's a guy who didn't stick around with Mario Cristobal on that staff, but it's a guy who's been around Cristobal on that staff. So I do believe that Plaz will come with a degree of talent, pedigree, and he'll be a very good add to the Auburn offensive line. At the other guard spot, we have Cole Skinner, who is 6'5", 325 as a senior, another USF transfer here. He started 8 games during his time in Tampa at both right guard and left guard, so he's versatile there in the middle of that offensive line. You can put him onto either side where you need. And at center is another USF guy in Cole Best, who is 6'4", 315 pounds. He is a senior. He started 20 games at center during his time with the Bulls, and he was 3rd team in the All-American Conference last season. Swapping sides of the ball to defense here, starting off with a transfer who is finally not from USF, Deshaun Womack, coming off the edge. At 6'5", 265, he's a senior coming in from Ole Miss. He played in all 15 games for the Rebels last year, rallied up 27 tackles, 4.5 TFLs, 2 sacks, and a forced fumble. And also coming off the edge with him is Nate Johnson, who is transferring in from Missouri. He is 6'5", 252 as a senior. He played in 10 games last year, only had 4 tackles, but he was at App State before Missouri, where he was a freshman All-American. So the talent is there, the size is there. We just have to realize that here this year with Auburn. And some other guys on the D ends, we got Jared Smith, who is 6'6", 260 as a sophomore. Played in 11 games last year with Auburn, had 4 TFLs, 2 sacks, and a forced fumble. And then Chris Murray, who is 6'4", 255 as a senior. He played in 12 games last year, tallied up 15 tackles, 3.5 sacks, and a forced fumble. Moving inside to the defensive tackles, Malik Autry is a big-time returner for Auburn here. He's 6'5", 330 as a sophomore, played in 9 games last season, had up 8 tackles, but he was the number 5 defensive tackle in his recruiting class last season. So retaining Autry with how much talent he has was a big-time win for Golesh coming in. And Cody Sigler here at 6'2", 302 pounds as a senior. He transfers in from Arkansas State. He started in 11 games last year and was 2nd team All-Sun Belt. Had 35 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, and a fumble recovery. Other guys at the tackle include Dallas Walker IV, who is 6'3", 362 as a senior. He played in all 12 games last year for Auburn, tallied 13 tackles and a forced fumble. And then Jordan Crawford, who is 6', 337 as a sophomore. He played in 9 games last year for Auburn and is looking to really up his role this season. Moving to the linebacker core, we got Xavier Atkins here, who is 6', 210 pounds as a junior. He was 1st team All-SEC and 2nd team All-America last season, totaled 84 tackles, 17 tackles for loss, and 9 sacks. So Xavier Atkins is ultra productive. He's back to really lead that defense now as an upperclassman. And helping him out is Bryce Diaz, a 6'1", 210-pound sophomore who played in 11 games, mainly on special teams last year, but did have 1 start at linebacker. Other guys in that linebacker room are Elijah Melendez, who is pictured here, 6', 228 as a sophomore. He was SEC All-Freshman team last year, played in all 12 games, had 29 tackles, 3 TFLs, a sack, and 2 picks. And also DeMarcus Riddick, who is 6'2", 228 as a junior. He played in all 10, had 4 starts last year for the Tigers. Sorry, not played in all 10. He played 10 games last year, had 4 starts with 13 tackles, a sack, and 2 pass breakups. Moving to the defensive backfield here now. Rayshawn Pleasant is maybe is the top returning athlete at corner, but he was 1st team All-SEC as a returner last year. He's 5'11", 200 pounds as a senior. He played in 11, had 2 starts at corner, and he was National DB of the Week for one of the showings he put up. So he's really a return specialist, but he's also very, very good out wide as a corner. Another USF transfer here in the secondary is Gavin Jenkins III. He's 6'2", 181 as a redshirt freshman. He redshirted last year, did play in 4 games, tallied 5 tackles, but really waiting on him for this year to really show what he can do with Auburn. Devin Williams is another guy in that DB room, 5'9", 168 as a redshirt freshman. So he had no action last year. Physically, you do want him to be a little bit bigger, but he was a top 20 player in Georgia as a recruit. So the talent is there, the athleticism is there. There's probably a little bit more size when we can really play in the SEC. And then Anquan Fagans is a 6 foot, 191-pound sophomore. He was one of 3 freshmen to play in all 12 games last year, had 24 tackles, and a pick for Auburn. So Fagans could really make a big jump this season. Going to the safety room, we got Eric Winters here, who is a 6 foot, 219-pound sophomore. He played in 12 games, only had 1 start last year, but did rack up 33 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and a sack. And then Champ Anthony also comes back. He's a 5'11", 188-pound senior who played in 7, started 4 last year. He was a team captain and racked up 13 tackles last season for Auburn. One more guy in the safety room there is Sylvester Smith-Reed, who is 6 foot, 195 as a junior. He played in 12 games, started 6, had 28 tackles, 2 TFLs, 3 pass breakups, and a fumble recovery. And then at kicker, Alex McPherson does come back for Auburn this year. He overcame those health issues last year to still kick in all 12 games. He is a senior this season. It was 20 of 23 on field goals and 35 of 35 on extra points. So that is Auburn's roster. That's their 2 deep. Those are the names that you're really going to have to look out for this year with the Tigers. Now, in terms of a ceiling, when we get into their schedule, we get into who they play and when they play them, we can really get a better idea for their ceiling. But this isn't a year where I really think Auburn competes for a playoff spot. I don't really believe that that's their ceiling. Their ceiling, I think, is more of a solid bowl game with it as a 7 or 8 win team. But there's definitely talent on this Auburn team. Now, a lot of it was high-level American Conference talent last year. Does that translate to being high-level SEC talent? I'm not sure we can really assume that everyone will. Some might. Like Byron Brown could have a great year. These receivers could have awesome years. The DBs could have fantastic seasons. But as a whole team, does the full squad of USF players play just as good? Do they scale their performance up to the SEC level? I have a hard time believing that all of them do. That does not mean that Auburn's going to be bad. It does not mean they're going to go 3-9, but it does mean that you kind of have to temper your expectations here. Understand that it's year 1 for Golesh and really give him time to get a proof of concept for recruits and then be able to bring in more of his guys who are, SEC caliber recruits as opposed to American caliber recruits next season. So if you have been enjoying this college football content, these roster breakdowns, and you want to see your team coming up next, I'll be having Florida's video out tomorrow. Subscribe to me here. Follow me on Twitter. I'll be doing this all summer long. I have been Will Thomas, and I will see you next time.